Hello everyone, welcome to the video series of the subject Object-Oriented Programming using Java. Myself, Hemalisha, I am working as an assistant professor in LG Institute of Engineering and Technology. In this video lecture, I am going to cover the topic finally block execution and exception propagation mechanism and its working in this video lecture. And this topic is basically part of unit number 4, package and exception handling mechanism. Now in previous video lecture, we have already covered the syntax and working of the try catch. What is the flow of the try catch code and what is the flow of if you are using the multiple try block and multiple catch mechanism inside the program. Now let's learn about the finally block. We have already learned the keyword and syntax of the finally block. We can write this finally block with the try block also. Now whenever you are writing this finally block, what will be the execution of your code? That I am going to basically cover in this video lecture. So let me revise this finally block mechanism. The finally block is basically used to execute the important code of the program, and this basically used to close or release the occupied resources by your object. Now it executes always whether an exception is handled or exception is not handled. In both the case, this finally block executes the statements that you have written inside the finally block. Now it must be preceded by the try block or catch, which means we can't use the finally block alone. If you want to write this finally block, then you can directly write after completion of try block, or if you want to write with the catch, then after completion of your multiple catch block, you can write this finally block. Now single finally block is possible for the single try block. Here multiple finally block like multiple catch block is not possible. So keep in mind, multiple catch for the single try is possible, but multiple finally block with the single try is not possible. So keep in mind this thing, right? Now when to use this finally block in your code? Because it is not a compulsory statement that you should use, but when to use that you must clear. So when you want to release or close the occupied resources by your object, like connection, file streams, URL streams, if you want to close such a resource, release such a resource, at that time you should go for the finally block. The reason behind that is it always executes though there is an exception, runtime exception in your try block, or there is no runtime exception in your try block. In both the cases, it basically close your resources. That's why it always executes. This code will always execute. That's why we are putting this closing and releasing code statements inside this finally block. Clear? Now let's understand the execution flow of a finally in exception handling. Say for the example, you have the set of code that might generate the exception runtime, and this runtime exception stored inside the exception object that I have already covered with the working of the exception handling mechanism. Now think about if you are going for the exception handling mechanism or not, and if you are not going for the exception handling mechanism. Say for the example, if you are not handling the exception handling mechanism, then your JVM first executes the finally block if you have written the finally block, and it prints the description of the exception and print the error stack on the console and terminate the program, but execute the finally block if you have written for your try block. But catch block is not written and only try and finally you have written, then this will be the scenario. It executes the basically finally block statements. Then it generates the exception description, and it prints this error stack trace from where this actual error occurs, and it terminates the program. Now, what happens if you have written the catch block? That means you have handled the exceptions. Then it first execute the match catch block. Any one catch block will be executed based on the error generated in your try block. It executes finally block always, right? And it executes rest of the code also, because error is handled because of catch is matched. But finally block executes because this error occurred and catch match. Error is handled also, and finally block will also execute, and rest of the code will also execute, right? So this is the mechanism whenever you are using the finally mechanism. So it might be possible catch not match, then also finally will execute. It might be possible catch match with the error generated, then in that case catch also executes and finally also executes, right? This I'm covering by using the example also. So let execute the finally. For that I'm taking our the demo code that I have already used to give the understanding of exception handling mechanism. So this is my Notepad++, and we have tried this number format exception and try to cover one string into integer. Say for the example, this string having this non-digit value inside the as a character set of this string. Now I am converting this integer string, non-integer string into integer value. So it generates the number format exception, and this catch match and this catch block will execute. Now if I am going to write this finally block over here, then the syntax of finally block is like this. Your finally followed this catch followed by this finally block, and here I am writing the finally block always run, always execute, or always run. You can write like this. I am making this statement like this, and see here. Now let me save this file and open the command prompt and try to compile this code. Here I am compiling code Java C demo.java. Syntax is correct. Now try to run this program demo. See here what error you are getting. The error you are getting like this, that this error you are getting like this, string not contain digits, that means catch output, then finally output, then rest of the code you are getting as an output, right? Now say for the example, I am not generating any exception runtime. That means I am giving the right input inside this string. Say for the example, I am writing this 5050 digit as a data inside the string. In this case, what will happen? There will be no error. This automatically pass your integer value, this string integer value into integer value. So there will be no number format exception. In this case, this catch will not work, not executes, and this finally also executes. So in previous scenario, error is generated, catch is also executed, and finally is also executed. Now in this scenario, the catch will not execute it because there is no error in this line. That's why, right? So if you are writing any code after this statement, say for the example, I am writing this system.out.println. After completion of this d data, like this, digital d data, and I am just printing this d data value, then this line also executes because of the reason this line never generates error. That's why it executes the remaining part of the try block also. So if there is no error, your whole code will execute, but catch will not execute, but finally will execute. So let's try to compile this code and execute this code. So here this is the command prompt, and first compile this code and compile, then save this, run this code. See here we are getting the this string value converted into integer value, and we are getting d data value as a 50. Finally always execute. In previous case we are getting the output of catch block as well as finally block. In this case we are not getting the output of catch block because there is no error, that's why, right? And rest of the code executes in both the case because here error is handled, that's why, and here error, there is no error, that's then also this finally block executes. Now you must know what should be right inside this finally block. Actually we are writing such a code in a finally block like this. If you are using the SQLs, then if you have the object of connection, then you can write this close connection dot close function call inside this finally statement. You can write, if you have the file input stream object fin, then you can call the close function of file input stream to close the file that you are using in your program. Such a statements you can write inside this finally block. So what will happen, though this whole code not executes, that might be error in your code, then also this finally executes, and it executes this two line also, and it basically release the occupied resources like connection and file input stream always in your program. It always release your resources occupied by this single program process, right? So such a statement we are actually writing in a finally block. Now let's move forward in this video. For that, see here, next is a mechanism of error propagation. Now what is error propagation? So error propagation means an exception is first thrown from the top of the stack, and if it is not caught, that means if you are not writing the catch block or your catch block do not match with the actual error, in that case it drops down the call state to the previous method. Now if no caught there, then the exception again drops down to the previous method, and so on until they are not caught or until they are not reached to the bottom of the call stack of the function. It always going to propagate, and this mechanism is called as a exception propagation mechanism. This I am going to cover by taking one example. So here let's try the example of this exception propagation mechanism. This is the Notepad++, and this I am going to cover by handling this finally execution as well as error propagation mechanism. In this case, this is the class finally demo. Now inside this class, this function process A having the try block and finally block both, and it generates the array index out of bounds exception. See here, this is the array index out of bounds exception. Now this function is not going to handle it because there is no catch block. So when you invoke this function, it propagates your array index out of bounds exception to the calling function. So from where you are calling this function, that function will actually get the error because of this process A function. Now see inside this process B, I am just writing the try block and finally block, and here this on this I am writing here only return statements. So this finally will execute or not? that we have to see also. Now see here, this static another process C function. Inside this, I'm just writing the inside process C, and only finally block I'm going to write. Now this all the three function I'm calling from this public static void main function. First of all, I'm calling process A. Now this process A basically generates the array index out of bounds exception. So here I'm catching that exception which is generated from process A, but it is not caught. That's why that is carry forwarded, and it will be over here. On this line you will get the exception, and this basically catch over here, and you will get the output of exception caught over here. Though this is the exception of process A, then also you are getting this exception inside the main, because this main is going to call this process A function. That's why process A's exception carry forwarded to this main function, and you can get this exception inside this E object, and you can print it over here also. Now after that, I'm just calling the process B function and process C function. Now what should be the output? Can you judge? So let me first compile and run it, then I'm explaining the output. For that, I'm going to compile this code, and the file name is finally demo.java, and just try to run it. Let me clear screen first, then Java, then finally demo. See here, inside process A, then process A is finally executes, then execution exception caught we are getting as a output. Now inside process B, then process B is finally executes, then inside process C, then process C is finally execute. So here you can get this thing also. See here the output. So when you execute it, you will get this output, right? So what will happen in this case, and what is the execution flow we are getting? What will be the execution? Let me explain from this program. So first of all, I am calling the function process A. That's why it generates the exception array index out of bound from here. Now it propagates from here to the main, but it is not caught. So before moving to actual calling function, it executes the finally block of the process A. Then it checks, is there any catch thing is available? Yes, it is catch inside this E, and it will print this. Now what will happen if this catch is not available? Then from this line your program stops, and it generates the print stack trace on your command prompt, right? Now this catch match and this executes. Now you are calling the function process B. Now because of this reason, this this output you are getting inside process B. Now though you have written the return statement, then also it first executes the finally block, then it returns from this function. So there is no effect of this return function, though you have written here the return statement, right? Clear? Now you are calling the process C. Now here you have not written the return statement, then also it returns. Now before returning to actual function call statement, it actually executes the finally block. So you will get the output of this finally block. That's why you are getting the output like this. So hope you people are clear with the this execution of this error propagation and finally block execution both together. Now let's try the another example and tell me the output of this code without compilation. First tell me the output of this code. Here this exception test is a class. See here, this exception test is a class. Now inside I am making one function main. Now I am making one try block and catch and finally all together. Now inside try I am just writing one system.out.println calling method A, then actually calling this method A. Now from here it actually invokes the method A. So first of all it generates this as a output system.out.println calling method A, you will get as a output. Now it calls the function A. Now this all the function I am making as a static because I want to call directly from the main function. Static only can call static members of the class directly. That's why I am making this function as a static. And I am calling this function directly from the main. That's why. Now inside this A function, I am creating x variable with value 8, y variable with value 0. Now I am just writing this z equals to x divided by y. Now what will happen? This y value I am getting as a 0. So it generates the divide by 0. That is your arithmetic exception generate. Now this line generates the exception. So the next line of this try block will never execute. So this line you will not get as an output. But what will happen? So here the exception type is arithmetic exception. So it first try to match the catch with the arithmetic exception. But this block is not this catch block is not for the arithmetic exception. This you have mentioned as a number format exception. So this catch will not work, not match, then not executes, right? But the finally executes and you will get the output like this. Method A finally executes. But the catch is actually not, this error is not actually caught. That's why this statement will not execute this. That means A and you will not get as a in a output as a output on the command prompt. Now this error propagate over here also because this generated exception not catch yet. That's why this line also will not execute. This written from method A you will not get as a output. And here this try to match the exception that is generated from this method A, arithmetic exception, this generated error match with this catch and it's stored inside the E and you will get the output main catch executes. Then after executing the catch block, it executes the finally block. So you will get the output main finally executes. Then you will get the main and also as an output. So what should be the output? Hope you people are clear. So let's try to compile it. The file name is exceptiontest.java. Open the command prompt and try to compile it. Java C exceptiontest.java. Then execute it. Java exception test. Right? See here calling A, then method A finally executes because catch not met. That's why catch not executed. Main catch run, then main finally run, then main end run. Now the same program you have to try for the value of a y. Here this is the notepad plus plus and this you have to try with the value y equals to 2 in this A function. So instead of 0 you have to try it with 2 value. Now what will be the output? Can you judge? So first line you will get your program starts execution from here. First line you will get calling method A as output. Then you are calling the actual function. So here this will be executed x equals to 8, y equals to 2. Now x divided by y, that means 8 divided by 2. Z value you will get as a 4, 8 divided by 2. So there is no divide by 0 error inside this try block. So it actually prints this statement's value of z equals to 4. So this line you will get as an output. This catch will not execute because there is no error in the try block. This finally block executes because finally always executes. Though there is error, though there is no error. So you will get this line as an output also. Now you will get this line as output because now there is no error inside the try block. So it continue with the execution of the next statements. That's why you are getting the output of this line also in this y equals to 2 value case. Right? Now this flow backs to over here because that function returns over here. Now there is no error in function. That's why you will get the output of this returns from method A as an output. Then Catch will not execute because there is no error. So no need to match the catch and no need to execute the catch. And finally you will get as an output. Let me save this file for the y equals to 2 value. Y equals to 2 value, and try to compile and run this code. Compile it and execute it. See here, calling method A, value of z equals to 4, then method A finally executes A and from the method A, written from the method A, then main, finally, then end. See here, there is no catch block execution. So hope you people are clear with the error propagation mechanism and finally block execution both together, how it works and how your try and catch blocks works and all the things. Now let me forward inside this lecture. Now we have done with all the keywords that starts from the final keyword, final, finally, finalize. Do you have the idea of a final and finalize? These two things I have already covered in my previous video lectures. So these three are the different thing in Java, though all this starts from this final. This final, first final is a actually keyword. This works as a modifier. You can create class, data member and function as a final, and it is basically used to create a constant, to stop inheritance and to stop overriding mechanism. This finally that we have covered in this exception handling mechanism, finally is a block that always executes though there is an exception in try block or though there is no exception in try block, right? So this is the basically exception handling keywords and this is the exception handling block. Now this is basically used to release the resources like file, connection occupied by your object. And this finalize is basically a function of an object class that we have already covered inside the garbage collector mechanism as well as in object class also. In both the video lecture I have covered this finalize function. Now this garbage collector is a mechanism to release the memory occupied by unused objects. Before releasing the memory of the object, this finalize function of an object class automatically invoked by the garbage collector. So this finalize is a basically function of an object class which is used as a destructor in Java. This I have already covered. So hope you people have the idea about the differences between this all the final keywords, right? So I am going to end this session now. Hope you people are clear with the execution of the finally block exception propagation. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you all of you.